The alchemist's quest to turn lead into gold is remembered as pseudoscience, as delusion, as centuries of wasted effort by men who didn't understand chemistry pursuing an impossible dream. But this narrative misses something crucial, which is that alchemy wasn't primarily about actually transmuting metals. It was about creating the appearance of transmutation, about convincing kings and nobles that gold could be made, and thereby extracting patronage and resources, and more fundamentally, kings themselves understood this. They used alchemy and alchemists not because they believed in literal transmutation, but because alchemy provided useful cover for what they were actually doing, which was debasing currency, creating money from nothing, inflating their way out of debts, all while maintaining the fiction that the currency was still worth what it claimed to be. Alchemy was the original monetary illusion, the medieval and early modern equivalent of quantitative easing, a way to create the appearance of wealth while actually just redistributing it. And the kings who employed alchemists weren't fools being deceived. They were sophisticated operators using alchemy as propaganda and cover for policies they understood perfectly well, debasement and inflation. And understanding this relationship between alchemy and monetary policy reveals something profound about how states have always manipulated money, how the illusion of sound currency has always been more important than the reality, how creating confidence, creating the belief that money is valuable, is itself a form of value creation, and how this has been understood by rulers for millennia, long before modern central banks made it respectable. The medieval monetary system was based on precious metals, gold and silver primarily, with copper for small transactions. The value of money was supposedly the value of the metal it contained. A gold coin was worth its weight in gold, a silver coin worth its weight in silver. This seemed straightforward, but it created enormous problems for rulers, because the quantity of gold and silver was limited, determined by mining output and trade balances, while the state's need for money was unlimited, particularly during wars, which were frequent and expensive. So medieval and early modern rulers faced a constant dilemma: how to get more money without having more gold or silver. And the answer they repeatedly discovered was debasement, reducing the precious metal content of coins while maintaining their face value. If a coin previously contained 1 gram of gold, you could make it with half a gram of gold and half a gram of copper, but still declare it to be worth the same. And now you could make twice as many coins from the same amount of gold, effectively doubling your money supply. This was inflation through debasement, and every medieval ruler who faced financial pressure did it. Repeatedly, some openly and others secretly, but all of them, because the alternative was defaulting on debts or losing wars, and debasement was less immediately catastrophic. The problem with debasement was legitimacy. If people discovered that coins contained less precious metal than claimed, they would refuse to accept them at face value. Merchants would weigh coins and discount debased ones. Foreign traders would reject the currency. Confidence would collapse, and the currency would be worthless. So debasement had to be hidden or justified. And this is where alchemy came in. Because if you could claim that gold was being created, that new gold was being added to the currency, then debasement could be presented not as reducing the gold content, but as supplementing it with alchemically produced gold. The currency wasn't being debased, it was being enhanced with scientific gold that was indistinguishable from natural gold. And this justified what was actually happening while maintaining confidence. Alchemists gave rulers cover to debase currency while claiming to strengthen it. And rulers understood this perfectly well. They weren't naive believers in transmutation. They were cynical employers of alchemists whose real job was providing legitimacy for monetary manipulation. The historical record is full of kings and emperors employing alchemists. Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II had a whole court of alchemists in Prague. Edward IV of England patronized George Ripley, who claimed to have made massive amounts of gold. The French kings employed Nicolas Flamel and others. Chinese emperors sought the elixir of immortality and incidentally gold-making. And while we might assume these rulers were deceived, were victims of charlatans, the evidence suggests otherwise. Many of these alchemists never actually produced gold, or produced only small amounts in theatrical demonstrations that couldn't be scaled up. Yet they maintained their positions for years or decades, kept receiving funding, were protected even when they failed to deliver. And this makes sense only if the rulers understood what was really happening. That the alchemists' real value wasn't in actually making gold, but in providing cover for debasement. in maintaining the fiction that the currency was sound, in creating elaborate rituals and demonstrations that confused observers and prevented clear accounting of how much gold actually existed. The techniques of monetary alchemy were sophisticated. One method was to call in all coins of a certain type, melt them down, add base metals to the mix, and reissue new coins with the same face value but less precious metal content. This was open debasement and happened frequently, but it was unpopular and caused immediate inflation, so a more subtle method was needed, and that method was gradual reduction. Each time coins wore out and needed replacement, the new coins would contain slightly less gold. Over years or decades, the currency would be substantially debased, but no single moment could be identified as the debasement. It just gradually happened, and alchemical rhetoric helped justify this. The new coins were purified, or enhanced, or made with scientific methods that improved their quality even as the gold content decreased. Alchemy provided vocabulary and concepts that obscured what was actually happening. Another technique was to create new denominations. A king could declare that henceforth one royal crown would equal 3 old crowns, and issue these new crowns with the same gold content as one old crown, effectively tripling the money supply by renaming the units. And this could be presented as monetary reform, as scientific advancement, as alchemical improvement, rather than as the inflation it actually was. The relationship between alchemy and banking also reveals the con. The first banks, the Italian houses we discussed earlier, dealt with the problem that kings constantly debased currency by using bills of exchange and accounting in abstract units. A florin of account that was fixed even if actual florin coins were debased. This allowed commerce to continue despite debasement, allowed merchants to maintain value even as currency was manipulated, but it also meant that kings needed some way to maintain the fiction that their currency was sound, because if everyone switched to using bank money and bills of exchange, the king's currency became worthless and the king lost seigniorage, the profit from issuing money. So kings would employ alchemists to claim that royal currency was backed by alchemical gold, that royal mints had secret techniques that made their coins superior. This was marketing, propaganda designed to compete with banking alternatives, and sometimes it worked, at least temporarily, maintaining demand for royal currency despite ongoing debasement. The philosophical cover that alchemy provided was also important. Alchemy wasn't just about making gold. It was part of a larger worldview about transformation and perfection, the idea that base materials could be perfected into noble materials, that this was natural and aligned with divine purpose, that the alchemist was assisting nature in reaching its intended perfection. This philosophical framework made alchemy seem legitimate, not just fraud but science and religion combined, and this legitimacy could be transferred to monetary policy. If alchemy was about perfecting materials, then monetary reform could be presented as perfecting currency, removing impurities, achieving the ideal form of money, and this rhetoric, which modern ears hear as nonsense, was convincing to medieval and early modern audiences who accepted the alchemical worldview. So employing alchemists wasn't just providing cover for debasement, it was cloaking policy in philosophical legitimacy, making monetary manipulation seem like natural law rather than political choice. The theatrical element was crucial. Alchemists would perform dramatic demonstrations, mixing substances in elaborate equipment, producing smoke and color changes, and eventually revealing small amounts of gold that had supposedly been transmuted from base metals. These demonstrations were pure showmanship. The gold was either introduced secretly or was already present in the starting materials. But they were convincing to observers who didn't understand chemistry, and more importantly, they created spectacle. They associated the court with magic and power and secret knowledge, and this enhanced the king's prestige, made him seem more powerful and sophisticated than rivals. And this prestige had value independent of whether any gold was actually made. A king known to have alchemists working for him, creating gold, seemed richer and more powerful than he actually was. And in an era when reputation and perception mattered enormously for state power, when wars were often won by coalitions and alliances that depended on perceived strength, this illusion of wealth had real effects. It attracted allies, deterred enemies, and maintained confidence in the currency. So alchemy was worth paying for even if it produced no gold, because it produced something more valuable, the appearance of wealth. which in politics is often more useful than wealth itself. The parallel to modern monetary policy is striking and not coincidental. Central banks today create money from nothing, not through alchemy, but through accounting entries. They expand their balance sheets, buy assets, create deposits, and thereby increase the money supply without any corresponding increase in gold or silver or any real backing. This is exactly what medieval kings wanted to do through alchemy, create money without limits, and modern central banks have accomplished what the alchemists promised. They can create unlimited quantities of money. The difference is that we've collectively agreed to pretend this is legitimate. We've created institutions and theories and rhetoric that make money creation seem scientific and necessary rather than fraudulent. Quantitative easing is just debasement with better branding. It increases the money supply, devalues existing holdings, redistributes wealth from savers to borrowers and from creditors to debtors, exactly like medieval debasement, but we call it monetary policy and central bank independence and optimal control theory. And these impressive-sounding terms serve the same function that alchemy served. They provide legitimacy for what would otherwise be recognized as creating money from nothing. The gold standard was eventually abandoned precisely because it constrained government's ability to do alchemy, to create money at will. Under gold, money creation was limited by gold reserves, and governments constantly bumped against this limit, particularly during wars and crises. So they debase or partially abandon gold or find ways to stretch gold reserves through fractional reserve banking and other techniques. But the constraint was always there, and after the catastrophe of the Great Depression, which was prolonged by the gold standard's restriction on money creation, the world gradually moved to fiat currency, money backed by nothing except government decree, and this was presented as modern and scientific, as learning from mistakes, but it was really just legitimizing what governments had always wanted to do and what alchemists had promised to enable: create money without limit. And now it's possible. The Fed can create trillions at will, no gold required, no alchemical deception needed, just accounting entries. And this is celebrated as sophisticated monetary management, as a tool for stabilizing the economy and fighting crises. But it's also debasement, it's inflation, it's reducing the value of existing money to create new money. It's exactly what medieval kings did, except now we pretend it's different because it's done with computers rather than crucibles. The question of whether this modern alchemy is beneficial or harmful divides economists as sharply as medieval scholars debated alchemy. Some argue that the ability to create money is essential, that it allows governments to respond to crises, to prevent depressions, to maintain full employment, that constraining money creation through gold or other arbitrary limits is counterproductive. These are the heirs of the alchemists, arguing that creating money is not just possible but beneficial, that it solves more problems than it creates. Others argue that unlimited money creation is inherently problematic, that it causes inflation, that it redistributes wealth arbitrarily, that it enables government irresponsibility by removing fiscal constraints, that it destroys savings and rewards debtors and speculators. These are the gold standard advocates, arguing that money should be constrained by something real. And this debate is ultimately about the same question medieval scholars debated. About alchemy: is creating something from nothing legitimate? Does it violate natural law or economic law? Is the appearance of wealth the same as actual wealth? And we haven't resolved this question any more than they did. We just pretend we have through institutional legitimacy and theoretical frameworks. The role of complexity and obscurity in modern monetary policy mirrors alchemy exactly. Just as alchemists used incomprehensible language and elaborate rituals to prevent clear understanding of what they were doing, modern central banks use mathematical models and technical jargon to obscure the basic fact that they're creating money from nothing. Terms like quantitative easing, forward guidance, yield curve control, these are the modern equivalent of alchemical terms like the philosophers' stone and transmutation, impressive-sounding concepts that disguise simple realities. And just as alchemists benefited from their audiences not understanding chemistry, central banks benefit from the public not understanding monetary economics. If people clearly understood that QE is just printing money, that it devalues everyone's savings to support asset prices and bail out banks, there would be more resistance. But the technical language and institutional legitimacy make it seem scientific and necessary. just as alchemy's philosophical framework made debasement seem natural and legitimate. So the modern alchemists at central banks have perfected what medieval alchemists could only promise: the ability to create money from nothing while maintaining the fiction that they're doing something scientifically sound. The distributional consequences are also similar. Medieval debasement enriched kings and those close to them at the expense of everyone else, particularly those on fixed incomes or holding cash. The king could pay debts with debased currency, could spend the newly created money before prices adjusted, while ordinary people saw their savings lose value. Modern monetary creation works the same way. When the Fed creates trillions through QE, that money goes first to banks and large institutions, who can buy assets before prices rise, who benefit from lower interest rates on their borrowing, while ordinary savers see the value of their deposits eroded, while wage earners see their real income stagnate even as asset prices soar. The mechanism is identical to medieval debasement. Those closest to the source of new money benefit, those furthest away pay the cost. And this was well understood by medieval critics of debasement, who recognized it as a transfer from poor to rich, from periphery to center, and modern critics make identical arguments about QE, that it increases inequality, that it benefits the wealthy and connected at the expense of everyone else. But just as medieval kings dismissed these criticisms while employing alchemists to provide cover, modern central banks dismiss similar criticisms while using technical complexity to obscure the redistribution. The ultimate question is whether creating money from nothing ever creates real wealth or just redistributes it. And this was the central question about alchemy too. Medieval alchemists claimed they were creating gold, increasing wealth, but actually they were at best providing cover for redistribution, taking value from currency holders and transferring it to the king. Modern central banks claim they're creating wealth, stimulating growth, supporting employment, but they're primarily redistributing, taking value from savers and transferring it to borrowers, taking value from prudent institutions and transferring it to imprudent ones that must be bailed out, taking value from the future through debt accumulation and transferring it to the present through government spending. This redistribution may be justified. There may be good reasons to transfer resources in these ways, but it's not wealth creation. It's reallocation, just as medieval debasement wasn't wealth creation, but reallocation from currency users to the state. And conflating reallocation with creation is the essential sleight of hand, the core deception of both medieval alchemy and modern monetary policy. The historical record of alchemists is mixed. Some were genuine seekers after knowledge who made real discoveries in chemistry, even while failing to transmute metals. Some were complete frauds who knew they were deceiving patrons, and many were in between, believers who also understood that their real value was providing cover for rulers, and probably modern central bankers are similar. Some genuinely believe in their models and theories, believe that creating money stimulates growth and benefits society. Others are more cynical, understand that they're primarily managing perceptions and redistributing wealth, and many are in between, mixing genuine belief with pragmatic understanding of institutional roles. But regardless of individual belief, the function is the same, providing legitimacy for money creation, maintaining confidence in fiat currency, obscuring the reality that modern money is created from nothing and backed by nothing except the government's ability to tax and its monopoly on force. This is the alchemical promise finally realized, the ability to create money at will, to inflate the money supply without limit, to debase the currency while denying that debasement is occurring, and to maintain the fiction, through institutional prestige and theoretical sophistication, that this is all scientifically sound and economically necessary. Kings used alchemy to fake wealth because faking wealth often achieves the same results as actual wealth. If you can convince others you're wealthy, you can borrow more, form better alliances, deter enemies, maintain authority over subjects. The appearance of wealth creates real political effects even if the underlying wealth doesn't exist, and this remains true. States that appear financially strong, that have confidence in their currency, that are seen as safe havens, these states can borrow cheaply, can run deficits indefinitely, can project power globally, while states that appear weak, that lack currency confidence, must pay high interest rates and face constant crises. So maintaining the appearance of sound money, regardless of the reality, is crucial to state power, and modern states do this through central bank independence and inflation targeting and communication strategies, all designed to maintain confidence in fiat currency, to prevent people from recognizing that money is being created from nothing, to ensure that the monetary illusion holds. And this is why central banks are so concerned with credibility, with communication, with forward guidance, because their actual power depends on confidence, on people believing that the currency is sound and that the central bank knows what it's doing. And if that confidence breaks, if people recognize the alchemy for what it is, the system collapses, just as medieval currency systems collapsed when debasement became too obvious to ignore. So the modern central bank is performing the same role that alchemists performed, maintaining the monetary illusion, providing cover for creating money from nothing, ensuring that confidence persists despite the reality. And in this sense, monetary policy has always been alchemy, has always been about creating the appearance of wealth through technical complexity and institutional legitimacy, has always been about maintaining fictions that serve state power, and the only difference between medieval alchemy and modern central banking is that we've collectively agreed to believe the fiction, to pretend that creating money through computer entries is fundamentally different from creating gold through transmutation, when actually it's the same thing, the same ancient dream of something from nothing, the same use of complexity and authority to obscure redistribution, the same function of legitimizing state power through the appearance of sound money, and the same ultimate question that remains unanswered: whether money created from nothing has value, whether the appearance of wealth is the same as wealth, whether alchemy in any form, medieval or modern, creates or merely redistributes, and whether a system built on this alchemical foundation can persist indefinitely, or whether, like medieval currencies that were debased too far, modern fiat currencies will eventually lose all confidence and value, revealing the alchemy for the illusion it always was. Though by then the alchemists, medieval or modern, will have long since taken their profits and left the wreckage for others to clean up, which is perhaps the real lesson, that alchemy has always been more profitable for the alchemists than for their patrons, and that modern monetary alchemy is no different, enriching those who practice it, those close to central banks and money creation, while imposing costs on everyone else who must accept debased currency and call it sound money because the alternative is admitting that the emperor has no gold and never did.